Welcome to the Mentors Military Podcast, another episode. I'm joined by Paul Martinez and Patty Collins that are helping me co-host this evening. So, hello, you two. Good to see you guys again.
Hello.
And so we have a guest. Uriah Popp actually served in the military and the Army, and we're going to get into his backstory and his career and everything. But he's also got a really interesting job today and career, and so I want to get into that as well. So welcome first off to the show, Uriah. Appreciate you coming on Mentors Military.
Hey, thanks for having me. Excited to do it.
So where is home originally? Not now necessarily, but before you came into the Army, what did you kind of call home?
So I'm from a pretty strong lineage of a military family. So my father was a artilleryman and a warrant officer, and so we actually got to serve together. So home has been all over the world. I graduated from Hawaii, and it's the nicest place that my dad served. So
oh my gosh,
I'm going to go ahead and claim that as home.
That's a good place.
Because Fort Stewart, Hinesville was great, but it doesn't beat the North Shore of Hawaii. So
was he probably one of the determining, or people that most influenced you in terms of going into the Army, or was it something else that got you to go into service?
I think that's one of those answers where everybody has a canned compelling answer that, honestly, I grew up military. It's really all I knew. I didn't know anything. And, I went to Fort Knox High School for a good bit of time, and a lot of the DoD schools are kind of been phased out, with the exception of Oconus. So it's really all I knew, and it was kind of just natural. I graduated. My parents did kind of encourage me to go to college, but it just wasn't the path the majority of my friends were going on. And most of them were in, some sort of delayed entry program. So they were kind of joining. They were going to basic between their junior and senior year, coming back and, telling these great stories. And so, that's kind of what I did. That's what, I'm sure we'll get into it, but all my sons have done. Every one of my sons is either in service still or has gotten out. So it's, like I said, it's kind of just been a way of life.
I think I can probably relate to that, Uriah, not necessarily from a DoD school, but being a Navy brat myself, a military brat, I grew up in a community where the majority of people, that's what they were. They were, brats themselves from the Navy. And so I didn't realize this until many years later. I think it was a 10-year anniversary, high school anniversary thing, or, graduation thing. And when I started looking around the room, I believe that there was like 50% or greater of our high school that ended up either going to the academy and going that route or going directly into military service of one branch or the other. And so I totally understand where you're coming from. But for me, it was to get out of a small community too, right? Because that kind of forms that bubble. And I wanted to get out of that. And you're right. Every one of us has some kind of story that's, that leads us to that. And having grown up in the military, and around it and stuff, it's certainly one of those things I would imagine for you is the same for me, that stuck in your brain. It's comfort. You always know it's there, It
is. There's a sense of security.
Yeah.
Even, it's even as crazy it is, I lived off post most of my career. And then when I got senior, it was kind of mandatory. I had to live on post. And then my wife has kind of taken a liking. So she's tells me all the time, I miss living at Bragg. I felt secure living on, I lived right across the street from the hospital. So it, it's, yes, it is a security blanket,
Yeah. Well, and not to mention, you could probably come home every day at lunch and didn't have a long commute. And, there's a lot of benefits there for sure. What was it that you enlisted into? What branch?
So I joined as a 91 Bravo at the time, combat medic. So I did the, back then they used to offer the station of choice. And so I went straight back to Hawaii, and I wanted to go back home, and I had married my wife at basic training Christmas Exodus. So I was the lonely guy who came back married. And so she was from Hawaii, so she was raised and grown up there. So that was my first station. So that's kind of that's kind of it.
How was it going back? Like I did one of those, and I don't know if you guys remember that whole hometown recruiter program. And I went through the hometown recruiter program and came back. It was well after they messed up my paperwork. I got one of those phone calls. I was probably already 13 months in the Army, and they go, "Hey, we found your paperwork. We were so sorry. We'll send you whenever you want to go." And I get there, and just going back home, I'm curious if you felt the same way. Like you're walking back in, and it's very different now. Walking in the door, like in my case, half my friends were gone already to the military. They weren't around.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think similar experience. I went to Mililani High School, and it's one of the several high schools that are kind of military dedicated on the island, or a majority of the military families kind of go to those schools. So yeah, a lot of the kids had since moved on. I moved there my senior year, so my dad just had got reassigned to Schofield Barracks from Fort Knox. So he was a drill sergeant for a long time, and we did. So I was on Fort Knox from like the 8th grade to my junior year, and then I transferred to Mililani High School in Hawaii my senior year. So it was still unknown, and I didn't really have any deep connections, really, other than my wife and kind of a small circle of friends. So it wasn't the same as probably if I went back to Fort Knox, where I kind of had lived there I'd say majority of my late childhood, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So now you're walking back in. It's really just like a first assignment. Yeah. I'm sure that was one of those assignments that I actually dreamed of. And unfortunately, when I got the call, if I remember correctly, this was probably 2000. Let's see, it would have been 96 time frame, I think, or something of that nature. They had a requirement that if you had pets, I think you had to quarantine them for 12 months. And I think it was like that, 6 or 12 months. Does that sound right, Patty? Something like that?
That's a long time.
I don't remember how long it was, but yeah, there was something crazy about that.
Yeah, and that was a deal breaker because we just got a puppy, and I think she was like about 12 months old, and that was just like we had small kids, and there was like no way we're going to put the family dog into a quarantine for that long. But that was one of those places that I definitely wanted to go to. By the way, it's our favorite vacation spot. I can't tell you how many times I've been there. I absolutely love Hawaii. So moving forward, where did you end up going after that then?
So after Hawaii, I moved to Fort Lewis, Washington.
Okay.
And did that I wasn't there very long, 2 years. And then my dad actually went to Warrant Officers Candidate School. Mm-hmm. And so he got signed to 3rd ID. And so then I put in a 4187 to go to Fort Stewart and got assigned there. And then really that's when things kind of picked up. He immediately 3rd ID the first push into the GWAT, and he was a radar warrant at the time, division targeting officer. And so yeah, then when I transferred, I didn't go to a line unit. I went to the hospital. So I went to Wynn Army Community Hospital at Fort Lewis as a medic, and then so that rolled into that assignment.
Before you were in a line unit. Okay, so how was it going from that environment and switching and stuff? Was it a big transformation for you?
A lot of guys really struggle with that, and I noticed it later as a CSM of a facility, and having line medics come in who just really couldn't make the change. And I enjoyed the medical aspect of it. I enjoyed medicine. So to me, it was a bit different. It's much more a daily operation mission. It's much more conducted like a business. You have beneficiaries that need taken care of day in and day out. So it's kind of it is a no fail. We have to provide for those beneficiaries. So, it's a little bit different, but I enjoyed medicine and, that aspect of it. So it really wasn't like I was that far out of my element, if you will.
was it at this time frame and being around, Rangers and those types of things that you started looking within the SOF community, or?
So yeah, well, no, here's how it went. So, I was a young medic and wanted to do great things at the time. And, I had fast tracked pretty quick. I had made E6 in, 4 or 5 years. And so my dad instantly deployed, and he was gone for, the first couple of tours. The third ID did, I think, 3 rotations. So he was gone for the initial push and then immediately rolled over into another job. So basically what happened is I went to my CSM and I said, hey, I want to deploy. So basically a lot of the medics got pulled straight to fill the line is what happened. They kind of uprooted the hospital. And so he was like, nope, I need you to stay here. And so it kind of, I was like, hey, I want to go like everybody else. And so I went and called my branch manager and I say, hey, I need to be able to deploy. Like, what do you have open? And he said, well, there's this new thing starting civil affairs. And if you're willing to go to the SOF Medic course, this was like in mid 2003, because before civil affairs was mostly 18 series guys kind of on their, I don't want to say their retirement tours, but kind of, it was what they did later on in their careers. So it was basically when the active duty battalion got kind of, they filled it with conventional MOSs. So there's an initial push. So he was like, we're starting this new thing. We're sending 68 whiskeys to this course. And if you pass SOCM, and you'll go through the Civil Affairs Medical Sergeant's course, and then you'll go to a team. So I said, sign me up. So within a couple of months, I was off the SOCM. I did BNOC en route. I had made E6, but hadn't gone to BNOC yet. So I did BNOC en route to SOCM, and before you know it, I completed it and got my wish to deploy. I wasn't in the battalion I didn't even finish in processing the battalion.
Oh my God.
And was out the door to Afghanistan. So,
well, that must have been quite interesting anyway, going from, course to course to course. I mean, you're talking about, I just heard BNOC, SOCM, Civil Affairs, Sergeant course. Yeah. So, I mean, and then of course, walking in the door and immediately deploying. What a shock factor. Yeah. Probably quite a bit on the family. It was
absolutely that.
Yeah, I bet.
It was, it's one of the, Timmy Strong was my CSM. He's a well-known guy in the community. And later I figured out where he kind of cut his teeth at, because I later went to that organization. But I can remember, he's like, hey, I need 2 medics to go out the door. Me and my good buddy of mine had just graduated, and they were like, absolutely. We were afraid we were going to miss the war. I mean, it's like, beginning of 2004, and we're like, yes, we need to go now. Yeah, sign us up. And, so I, volunteered. And the funny part is I remember going to the teams the detachment have already deployed. I think it was 7th Group's first rotation. So we got attached to Siege of Sodif, and then I got attached to a 7th Group team in DR and Dehraoud, Afghanistan. And I was like, what do I bring? And they're like, Doc, bring what you need. And that was like my packing list, bring what you need. And so I brought everything, tough box full of medical books. Cause I didn't, just straight out of school, I was like, every new medic was afraid to, get there, not have what you need. So that was I went from, like you said, school to school to school to 2 days, 2 or 3 days after in processing to on a plane.
How good was your packing list in the end? Did you end up using a lot of that stuff, or did you have a bunch of weight?
No, the funny thing is I didn't get cold weather gear.
Oh.
So it was like back then was like RFI, and I had missed the battalion's RFI. And so I got into country, and my team leader's like, hey, where's your cold weather gear? And I'm like, I think I still had a field jacket. And back then they were still issuing desert, the desert cam and like the desert body armor. So it was, I think I had a desert field jacket. Like was my issue. And a bear suit. Yeah, I had a bear suit.
Those things didn't keep you warm at all.
Yeah, so he took me down to the North Face store at Green Bean and like hooked me up with some clothes.
I'm curious about like SOCM looking back on it. I mean, you were one of the originals, I guess, to go through that program.
Yeah, there was a couple. Well, for the civil affairs course, there was I think there was a class before mine, and we were kind of all senior NCOs at the time. We were all E6s, E7s. And I think, most of all the 11 Bravos who became team sergeants, they pulled them straight out of Ranger Battalion. So I think they kind of pulled them out. And then all the engineers came from mostly the Bragg units engineers. And then your team leader was branch and material, but most of them we had some 18 series, some 18 alphas. And then we had some that they were just standing up the civil affairs qualification course.
Yeah.
So at that time you didn't even have to go to it. If you were a grad of your course, you just went and deployed, and they caught you up whenever they could.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't civil affairs primarily now more reserve based than it is active?
Yeah, it's always been 96% reserve. So it's a revert. And then the one, I think the one airborne organization was the 96th at the time. Mm-hmm. So the 96th Civil Affairs Battalion kind of is was kind of the legacy active duty unit, which was only 4% of the force at the time. I think we started Echo Company back then, which was Echo and Fox which they were AOR kind of aligned with the groups. So every battalion every company was aligned to the battalion, or every company was aligned to a group, with the exception of Echo Company, where I went. And Echo Company was your SMU support. So we were assigned to the Ranger Battalion. So my first rotation was what was called a regional deployment. So it was with a group. And then after that, we got on like the tier cycle. And so we had 4 companies or 4 teams within the company, and we would just rotate through the battalion. I never supported the battalions in Iraq. I always supported in Afghanistan.
Yeah. So, I mean, that must have been a pretty interesting time. I mean, you're like a legend here. I mean, we're talking about early stage. Like early stage civil affairs and SOCM and with the civil affairs and all of that. I mean, you really came in. You probably walked uphill, barefoot in the cold the whole bit, right?
No. It's like most things new, right? So I noticed this with several growing organizations now. It's the willingness to go and do something different, but everybody makes it harder for the next people after that.
Oh, most
so
definitely.
That's what I've kind of learned, the way the military does things. It's like the first guys in, they kind of create it, get through the process, they take some risks, they get there, and then they make it harder for everybody else to get in. So I'm going to say I had the easy path.
Nobody ever says that. Yeah. And then there are the people that say back when it was hard, right?
Yeah. No, it was fun. I tell you, I enjoyed that mission set a lot. It was a lot of instant gratification kind of work. You help folks. Supporting the regiment and the tier was a little bit different. The majority of the work was what's called like Salacia condolence payments. So bad targets, it's like basically folks go in and tear people's houses up, and there's like a group of guys who like roll out in a soft skin Humvee and like, hey, we heard something happened in your house last night. We're here to like make it right. It was horrible. Oh yeah.
Oh, God, that kind of reminds me of back in the day where you do maneuver training and you'd have the guys riding around in the Humvees with the little white stripe around their helmet and everything. And they were the guys that were writing all the damage reports so they could pay the local people
that's it.
Yeah, for all the
death
damage.
Mitigation. That was kind of like any big target that went bad that made kind of like international news. That's mostly what we dealt with. Tough boxes full of money to make things right. And I learned really quick that life certainly has a price in that country, and it's very quick to be able to negotiate to that price. And that's what kind of what I did for quite a few tours, was just basically that,
Yeah. What happened when you came back from deployment? Get returned back to Fort Stewart, and well, actually, you were at Bragg at this time frame.
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
at that time I'd moved back. So, a lot of schools. So it seemed like that's all my team started wanting me to hit every school there was. So between deployment, on those rotations, I kind of forget the things go into a blank, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I've actually think I've forgotten deployments. But it seems like, I did like 5 rotations to Afghanistan back to back to back to back to back. And it seemed like it was, go to SEER school between this deployment, go to this school. Okay, we're going to send you this shooting course. Okay, we're going to send you to this course, to this course. So there was never downtime because they were building, right? So what happened as the battalions built, they split. So the 96 became the 96th and 7th. And then the 96th and 7th became the 96th, 7th, and 8th. And then they made a new, so they didn't really get a lot of aggregate growth. Basically what they did is it just kept dividing. So you would go from different company and then you'd be on a different rotational. And so it'd be like, okay, I got home, but since we're the down team, we're ramping up for this next deployment because we're on this new chart. And so it kind of, was never ending, but I had a good time doing it.
I heard that a lot.
I had a good time up until the surge.
Oh,
and that's, that was hell. But,
I've heard that a lot from like civil affairs and PSYOP, the same thing. The op tempo is one thing of deployments and stuff, but the op tempo when you come back is very much like what you just described. It's, attending courses, it's or training others. It's doing things that in the civilian side is not just garrison, going to an office, going to the gym, and or doing those types of things. You're constantly in a training cycle, and when you come out of the training cycle, you're going right back into deployment. And I know, Paul, and Patty, that's a lifestyle that you guys are very much familiar with as well.
Oh yeah, go all the time. There was I want to say it was about almost an 18-month period, and I was keeping track on a calendar, and I spent I think 6 weekends at my house in 18 months. I'm like, this is not great. And then you look at your buddies that have families. I'm like, how are you keeping it together? How are you able to do this? Because I've, couldn't even have a pet. I was gone so much. But it's like you said, Uriah, you go to a shooting school, you do well. They're like, well, you're going to this other sniper course, and then you're going to go to this, 3-week training, and maybe you're going to get your EMT cert, or there's always a training opportunity. And if you're doing good, they'll stick you in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that must have been very challenging with you and kind of being a newlywed as well, because I guess around this time frame you guys hadn't been married that long, so I still considered it a newlywed. You're probably about 5 or 6 years in.
Yeah, I tell you, it's really kind of sad. My kids remind me now that they're grown. They're like, you were never there. And it's kind of almost hurtful. And it's just like you're right. I was so busy, I didn't even take the time to stop to think about it. And that was kind of, at the time, all 3 of my sons were probably in middle school or elementary. And yeah, I had done, like I said, 4 or 5 rotations to Afghanistan, then the surge, and then with schools all in between. So, and then before that, I went through the whole pipeline where my family stayed in Stewart while I went through school. And so, there's a good chunk of about, I look back on my records, and there was, I think, 11-year period where I deployed at least once every year for 11 years. And that's just deployments. That's not counting. But that's everybody's story now. It's nothing unique. That's just the life of being a soldier now. That garrison military that I entered into now they don't know, my kids who, I have this son who was 11 Bravo in the 82nd and 2 kids who are in Intel. that's all they know. They only know a deployment military. They don't know the big field training exercise, military dog and pony shows, parades, and
Right.
it's changed. It's evolved, and now senior leaders. The thing is, as growing up senior leaders, we used to get kind of ridiculed by those old senior leaders who were from that era, who was like, you guys don't know how to counsel, you don't know how to mentor, you don't know how to you just know how to deploy and prep. That's what you know how to do. We were a fighting military, and so now what I see, a majority of those guys are gone. So the senior leaders, that's all they know now is a forward military. We don't know a garrison military life.
Yeah. We've talked about
so
that.
So there's all the struggles that come with that, so I think all military families now are, when I grew up, my dad went to Kosovo and Bosnia, and he was an artilleryman. Field is in his title, field artillery. So that's what he did. He went to the field. So
Yep.
He'd be gone for 30 days and he'd go to the field, and then he'd come back, and that was just kind of what we knew. But it's kind of, now it's different.
Well, your kids, you mentioned, are now in the military, so I'm curious that you brought it up about their perspective of how things were as they were children. How do they now look at that and see what you went through now that they're an adult and living part of that themselves?
If I'm being like transparent and honest, there's resentment. There's some selfishness that I think should be expected, that they deserve to have a family, a fully functioning family unit with a dad who was around. And so, there's dark sides of my story, just like most folks. And, my middle son really struggled and went through some tough times and alcoholism. And, I had my own, struggles with PTSD and everything else that this story can go rabbit holes really quick. But so I think my older son, who's he's now in one of our SMUs, one of the ones that I was in, he's now there. He's kind of a legacy there. And I think he understands. So he sees it. He's a little bit matured and sees it now from his perspective of life and how he knows it, and the work ethic you have to have, and just the attentiveness to organization. And as ugly as it is, family comes second. I mean, it just does. And we preach different, but that's not reality. That's not what we expect. And so I think he sees it. My youngest son still's got some maturing to do, and he'll be graduating airborne school here in like a week. I was hoping I'd get to go down and see him. All my other sons graduated from airborne school, and I got to go. So he's
Are they allowing everybody to get in there and start seeing some of the graduations? Because I knew that was part of the issue with Fort Benning, right?
Yeah. What do they call it? It's called I can't think of the word, but it was like a clean course or something like that, where basically there's no graduation, there's no family days, there's no, just like the basic trainings and AITs are kind of now, they're kind of, they just, I guess they're a little bit risk adverse to that, and trying to protect and make sure that they don't have to.
Yeah.
And I could see, they don't want to get people held up in their training tracks and stuff like that from getting an exposure or whatever.
Well, I think all that you just described, and the challenges that you have felt, through trying to grow your military career and having a family and all that kind of stuff is, really helpful to those who are listening, because I think that some people who may not have entered service yet and are thinking that they want to go, especially within the SOF community, need to, kind of understand the sacrifices that a lot of those individuals end up playing. I mean, you end up having those challenges. It's real. Okay. So if you're going to explain this story, and it's not always heard, from the recruiter, if you want to hear the full story and you want to hear about the challenges and the reality of going within those roles, you've got to be able to embrace all of it. and understand what it's going to take to be a part of that type of unit. And so I think it's a very valid point. And I think too with that there are possibilities of having post-traumatic stress or traumatic brain injury because your exposure to those types of opportunities are greater. And that's
Sure.
also part of that story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think, that's one of the things I think we try to do, at least through this platform, is to share that reality, and give people that proper perspective. People see photos out on social media. They see, hear cool guys' stories. People write books or whatever that may explain things in a very different way that sounds like, or through their video games or whatever, hey, this is what I want to do. But you got to really understand the full package of what goes into that type of lifestyle. And I appreciate you sharing that story because it's a real story. After you came and you were at 96 and stuff, what happened after that? Where did you end up going to?
So what happened is that it professionalized. So what they did is they created the MOS. So they created the 38 series MOS, and they basically said, convert over and become a 38 series or find a new job. So that's kind of what happened to all the folks there. So a majority of the folks, like I kind of described before, they fast tracked, they stayed. There's a whole new MOS, and there's a pyramid at the top of the pyramid's completely open, and they kind of rocketed through the system. And so me, I kind of wanted to stay a medic. Like I love medicine and practicing it. So I had tried out, and a friend of mine had went up to an SMU in Virginia. So I went up there and tried out to be a medic up there. And then I did that for about 6 years.
Did you get the civil affairs as your secondary? Is that something that you were able to pick up? So they didn't even, okay. I was wondering about that.
No, it was the opposite. So they would let you keep your legacy MOS as kind of your secondary. Kind of, I think they do this similar with like 18 series. If you go through the path and you retain like 11 Bravo as your secondary MOS or whatever you started as. So they did that, but it wasn't. No, it wasn't like we retained the identifier. So civil affairs medic. So your whiskey 1 identifier and your whiskey 2 or 4, whatever it is for the sergeant's course. But other than that, and really, at that time I was an E7 when I tried out. And so I went up there, and there was really no need for me to kind of go back. I still wanted to be a medic, so it worked for me. They were at the time looking for people to be battalion senior medics and staff jobs, and I still was having fun. So
yeah.
So I went up to be a squadron medic and had a lot of fun, and got to go on some more trips and do some fun stuff and work with some great people.
So what ended up, finally getting you back? I guess when you went through the Sergeant Major's Academy and you pinned on, they put you into a CSM slot within the hospital. Was it one of those things that you really kind of wanted to do, or was that just part of the career progression?
No. No, I actually I fought it. Like I wanted to go. So hindsight's always 20/20. I'm glad I went the path I did now, but I wanted absolutely nothing to do with El Paso. I didn't want to go to the academy. I wanted to go to JSOFC or whatever. So three medics all made sergeant major in the unit, the same list. So myself, Sean Mullins, and Hector Valle Ortiz, they're both pretty high up in the SF. I think they're both battalion CSMs or right now. So we had all made it, and there was basically one sergeant major job, medical troop sergeant major job. And so two of us got the boot, and one of us got to stay. And so then I went kicking and screaming to the academy, which I absolutely had a great time. I met some lifelong friends there. I would absolutely encourage it. Like a lot of folks want to do non-resident stuff like that. It's not the way to go, because those connections are going to help you for the rest of your tenure in the military. those are the people you reach out to. And even right now, I just hired like 3 of my classmates. They now work with me at the company, and we've stayed close friends, and getting business done now, because I'm a director of DoD programs. And so, I reach out to former classmates to kind of help me get work done. And so it's been instrumental in my transition, just those relationships and that aspect of being able to successfully transition. Mm-hmm. A lot of folks, what I see is they kind of get stuck in that. They're not really I don't want to say this the wrong way, and I don't want it to be taken the wrong way, but essentially you kind of get really good in one area. And that's kind of what I'll describe what I used to tell the field medic story, that would struggle when they go in the hospital, and they'd have great NCOERs. And I would be like, well, you've proven that you can be successful in one environment. You have to now prove that you can be successful in this environment, or you're not multidimensional. You're great there, but now you've kind of grown out of that role. You're no longer needed to be a squad leader. Now we need you to manage. And so there's an administrative component of most jobs. And so, so I say that, like, a lot of folks, I think, get kind of, they don't get the exposure when they kind of stay soft centric. And so, they have a lot of fun, and I wanted to have fun and play to the very end. And again, I don't mean play like I say play because that's what it felt like to me. It was like a day of work. It was fun, going out skydiving and, just like shooting and doing, just fun stuff, cool stuff all the time, and deploying with great people. But the challenges are like learning how to be successful and manage conventional organizations where not everybody's been through a weeding out selection process. And so those organizations are much more difficult to lead. You know what I mean? You don't have triple volunteers who would essentially do anything that you've asked to make the mission happen. You really got to coach, teach, mentor, problem solve, mitigate, make people work with strengths and weaknesses. Those are challenges, and those helped me, I think, transition, or able to transition, I guess I would say,
Yeah.
And so that's what I would say as far as transitioning is look for some opportunities that are more in line with, the more the corporate business world, if that's what you're going into. I think that was helpful for me.
I think these are all valid points, and I think, Patty, you probably shared some of the same similarities in terms of, from an officer standpoint in running conventional leadership roles and in the military. And then, of course, we talk about your network is your net worth. That's kind of the thing with the transition or with the military that a lot of people don't look at, is that growth pattern of trying to go in between different roles.
This has been really, really fun to listen to. And I will disclosure, when I know I'm going to interview someone, I'll totally Google stalk you. And you were super hard because I found your LinkedIn profile and that was kind of it. But I do know one of your BNOC instructors from when you were just a young whippersnapper that I was actually texting at the beginning of this. And I know some of your civil affairs counterparts, but Timmy Strong was a worker. I worked with Timmy Strong in that organization where you went. And I left there in 2004. So we could probably play the do you know game, especially in the MedShed was such an impressive group in particular. And I think, one thing we say about jobs like that is the best thing about working in a job like that is you never have to leave. But the worst thing is you never have to leave. Right. And so then when you do leave, the first thing you notice is like there's moments of frustration, certainly. And then you realize I have so many more tools in my toolkit on how to be a leader or a manager or a mentor that I learned from I love how you described it. Like you didn't have to really always motivate people to do their job. They would have gone, walk through fire for you or for the team, and you would have done it as well. And now you have people that have different talents, different motivations, but you still have a pretty big mission, especially, we haven't even gotten to your time at Womack yet, which I'm super excited about, of how do you solve those big, humongous challenges? And I would guess you'd say all your experiences leading up to it prepared you for that job.
I would have hoped. Actually, you know what? Womack, I thought was, I hate to use the word easy, but I had resources. My job before that, so prior to that, right out of the academy, I was the CSM of Medac, Alaska. So it's a battalion CSM job. So essentially I had like 4 E8s, and they were pretty long in the tooth E8s. I was a E9 at like 17 years, and I had E8s with 24 years in, and they weren't happy about having the new young guys. So I got little help a lot of time. Some of them I did. There's a few, but for the most part, you know, I had to rely heavy on some E7s, and they kind of picked up some slack. But yeah, so that was a much greater challenge for me. But that was that was also my most rewarding job that I had. You know, I'd like to say that, you know, doing all the cool things and deploying as a direct action medic and, you know, all this cool guy stuff and jumping out of airplanes was, but really the most rewarding job was really up there. And, you know, I just was at the best medic competition last week where I got to present pistols to the winning team. It's a new thing we started. And actually 2 of them were my former E4s in Alaska. And so they had done great things. And so allowing, you know, just by having the authority to say yes, you know, I took pride in never saying no. Like if a soldier asked for something, as bad as that may sound, you know, it's just like I would find a way to get them to the school. If they were motivated and they were doing a good job, I think that was my job, is to provide them opportunity or, you know, open the door for them, figure out how to open the door for them. So, you know, I would send kids from a hospital in Alaska to airborne school, you know, not very often heard of, not very often done, but, you know, through the network, through, you know, CSMs that were down at the Maneuver Center of Excellence, you know, I could make a phone call and, hey, I need a slot. You know, I just put these kids through SAMC, and they, you know, had E5s get through the SAMC process or win Soldier of the Year, or, you know, just things, just doing a great job and just being able to
use it as a
reward them a little bit different way that would also enhance their career and open doors for them. You know, that truly was rewarding for me. And then once I got to Womack, you know, at the brigade level, when you have a staff of 06s, you know, a council of colonels to help you out with your problems.
No offense, Patty.
Life gets pretty easy. You just walk into a meetings and, you know, you sit down and there's, you know, 10 other 06s around the table who are there to support you and give you the help you need. So, you know, you really just empower them to make, you know, their mission happen and get out of their way, really.
Yeah.
You know, let them do what they know how to do. You know, don't have them there from the neck down. You know, have them there from the neck up, thinking and working. So,
well, I love, you know, so your career path was almost perfectly set up, and I don't know if it was by design or you actually, you know, played a role in it or whatever. But I mean, you went into specific roles that challenged you in unique ways, in different ways. And then, like you said, even when you became a sergeant major and you went kicking, screaming to the schoolhouse, but yet you made friends and created a network that would help you even grow even further, or at least help you be a better leader, because then you could reward your staff. And then having a challenge that you had in Alaska that set you up for the opportunities, probably not just at Womack, but even for life thereafter, as being a brand new leader and someone that has to prove himself once again. It's like the perfect story. You know, this is what people should listen and pay attention to in a very early career. The advice that you're providing of the career path that you took, and what you're saying about not always saying soft and challenging yourself outside of that, looking for those hospital opportunities and those things that are the uncomfortable and not nearly as fun, will help build your career, not just within the military, but life thereafter. It's a growth, right? I mean, you grew all the time through this whole thing.
Yeah, there was definitely growth there. You know, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that, you know, that there wasn't some regression along the path. You know, it's a pretty painting now standing back and watching it, but
yeah,
there was definitely some poor strokes in there along the way, but and once I got to Womack, and then it was really just my career was actually, so I got selected on the CSL, the command select list. You kind of put in for the jobs you want, and so my number one choice was Hawaii. I wanted to go back to Hawaii. I wanted to end my career where I started my career. And actually, there's a little bit more to this story. So actually, I got a call from the unit CSM asking me to take over the unit med section back. And so then I found out the only person who can let you out of the CSL process is the Sergeant Major of the Army. And so I quickly got told, no, you're on the CSL, but I didn't know what job I was. Then I found out I got my number one pick, Hawaii. So not so bad, until I got a call. I got a call from Sergeant Major Ecker at the time, who was the MedCom Sergeant Major for the Office of the Surgeon General. And he said, hey, I hope you didn't want to go to Hawaii because I'm sending you to Fort Bragg.
Oh.
And I was like, Roger, Sergeant Major. So he's like, yeah, all those great things you were doing in Alaska, I need you to do them at Womack. I had started a prolonged field care program for the conventional medic at the time. There was nothing out there, so I created a course to it was when everything was going on in the peninsula, in Korea. I had gotten asked, due to my background, can you create a course? Korea, there we were going, it was kind of a prolonged field care. That was that's what the expectation was. There was going to be no great tail access to move patients. There was going to be overwhelming kind of casualties, and people were going to have to sit on them, and medics weren't trained to sit on casualties. So I kind of created a program while I was over there. So I got asked to bring it to Bragg, and so yeah, kind of success kind of got me out of my what would you call it? What's that called? It's not your
comfort zone.
No, it's not your honeymoon assignment, but your
swan song. Your swan song.
Yeah. So I was like, it's going to be beautiful. It started in Hawaii and it's going to end in Hawaii.
Yeah. What did your wife say when you're like, honey, we're not going back to Hawaii?
I didn't really read her into the whole thing. So.
Ooh.
It's a strong move.
No, not until there are orders in hand. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the Army needed me to do something. So, what's the other answer when, the Office of the Surgeon General says, hey, I need you to do a job. Oh, Roger that, Sergeant Major. Like, yeah. That's pretty the only answer. So,
well, I want to, you talked about the transition and everything, but I think it would be really cool to talk about what you're doing right now. And you kind of highlighted that, and that you just got an opportunity to hand out pistols to guys that were E4s at the time frame. So help us kind of understand how you made that transition, how you came into the role that you are right now.
So it's a really kind of a odd path, and it's kind of like tragedy that end with a good outcome. Let's just call it that. So basically, coming towards about my first year into the job, I started experience a lot of old PTSD stuff, symptoms, and I became suicidal and got hospitalized, and so I ended up on I got med board. I didn't regular retire. I medically retired, and it's not the way I thought I was going to end my career. Things were going great. I was selected for a 2nd Brigade. It would probably be a nominative CSM right now, but life caught up, and just a lot of 11 deployments caught up continuously. I had you had mentioned the Hunter 7 stuff. I haven't done a lot with them, but I have done a lot with Sean Mulvaney, who's one of the lead researchers, and we kind of took the stellate ganglion block across SOCOM. We took it to the unit at Bragg.
Paul's had it.
Yeah,
Thanks,
the unit at
that's a life changer.
at Damnick, and I had 5 shots myself, and so so that caught up with me. I ended up in a hospitalization, and then I did an intensive outpatient program where I went to Fort Sam and really got like 6 weeks of in-depth work done. All during that time, I started, kind of trying to get a hobby again, and I, developed a medical device, a hemorrhage control device for junctional hemorrhage controls, and I developed that. And so as I was kind of going through that process, I started kind of trying to figure life out and figure out what I wanted to do. So once I got out of the program, it's like, okay, you're going to go through the med board process. And for senior leaders, it's once you go into that process, you're not going back into the military. You're on your way out. And so, I kind of took it in stride, and just I really kind of pushed away, and kind of it was intentional, but it wasn't out of embarrassment, because I've talked a lot about PTSD and traveled around and talked at SOMA about it and other things. But I pushed away from the organization. I didn't try to still be the CSM. I let my battalion CSM kind of go in, and obviously it got support from my commander, and told him I wanted to do a career skill program. Kind of told him I've been working on a medical device and I'd like to intern with the company. And that's where I got linked up with my current job at Combat Medical and Safeguard Medical. Started by 2 former Delta Force medics, and they made devices like combat gauze and the Croc, some pretty well-known devices, and took on my device and end up getting a licensing and royalty agreement with them where they're, putting my device through the FDA process. And I started interning as a product developer. And so, in that time, they offered me a job, and I was just sitting back there making devices, and they'd give me a problem, and I'd sit back there and work on a problem. And, then eventually my time came, and, my medical board was finished, and I transitioned over and started working with the company. And to kind of what Patty said, how did you word it? I always call it your Rolodex, right? People want you for your Rolodex, but you said your net worth is directly proportional to your net worth or something like that.
Yeah, your network.
That's pretty good. I like that.
Your network is
which
your
is
net worth.
Absolutely true in business, what I've learned. And so it's not that they use people, but industry definitely needs help to get in some doors, and there's a shelf life to everybody's Rolodex. And so, so I was, obviously worked with a lot of people and pretty connected. So, they eventually offered me a job to move up and become a director of DoD programs. And so I, start doing that. And right now, it scratches that itch for me where I still get to be involved with soldiers and go out and support them and go talk to them and, support things like the Best Medic and go and visit and really help expand their medical capabilities and work on, just because I'm so in tune with that space where, creating medical capability essentially at the medic level. And you're working with units to, we're working with some of the corps for their whole blood programs, fresh whole blood on the battlefield. SOF's been doing it for a while, but for the conventional force, that's new, and there's a lot of logistical and training deficits that have to be crossed to make that fully function. SOF does things relatively easy because they're relatively small. They can incorporate new capability pretty quick and make realistic, real-time change. But, you know, big armies like moving a battleship, you know, it turns slow. So that's, you know, kind of, you know, what got me here and what got me to do things like that, and why I still enjoy it. You know, I still get to give back. And so, you know, I think that I think most of us, once we've spent a career dedicating, you know, I don't know, you know, what brings you guys to doing these podcasts, but I think it's a little bit of that connection to the tribe.
It's the same thing,
if you will.
Yeah.
And that sense of family and common language, events, you know. And so, you know, that's what got me here, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing today, I guess.
Well, along that path, I think you had to have kind of a dose or a sense of like reality, humility, and such, because I mean, you go from being a CSM, somebody who had served in a SOF community, who is kind of humbled a little bit in terms of, you know, having to confront the challenges that you did with post-traumatic stress, but then also making a transition, and you go in at an internship level. And then, you know, as a guy that's working at a very low level within an organization, and building your way back up into it, as opposed to somebody walking out the door and once again using my Rolodex and making something happen with the title that I feel like I've earned from my time in the military. And what I think, what it says more about you, Uriah, is that you weren't possibly as focused as much on that as you were trying to find your passion and purpose, and you knew that it had a lot to do with giving back in some ways and using your skills and talents and expertise to help that community grow. And it's something that you love so much. You know, that's what it says to me, at least, by listening to this, as opposed to hunting the almighty dollar and the title, you know? Yeah.
I mean, I think that I don't want to say beat up on SOF, or folks, but I think that's what SOF, there is a bit of humility that is in there, and it's personability that you kind of learn. You learn to deal with people and work with people as them. You know, the first name, you know, a lot of times SOF gets beat up on the first name thing, and really just, we treat each other as Joe and Bobby and Dan, but really those are some really valuable skills. And when you let your position and your ego be directly linked to you and your inner self, that's when you, I think, have the greatest. So it was very easy for me, although Nikki might say different. I think you guys know Nikki. She works for me. We work together, I should say. But to let go of the sergeant major role, it was very, you know, I always like just being Uriah. You know, I'm just a dude. My service is no greater than anybody else's. Matter of fact, your service is probably better than mine. I never had to do 18 months, you know, on a rotation. You know, my hat was always off to those guys that, you know, I was rotating in and out of theater. I may have been there 2 or 3 times and they were still there. So, that piece alone always kind of kept me grounded, and that what I'm doing is not better than you. It's just different. You are absolutely just as valuable and just as critical, and the things you're doing, they're not for nothing. And so I think that's one thing that helped me, I say, transition, is just that dynamic of SOF, of dealing with people as people. You know, Patty probably knows, you know, I lived as a civilian for 6 years. My senior 6 years in the military, I was never a first sergeant. I was never a platoon sergeant. I was a CSM. I was a team medic and then a CSM. I was never even a staff sergeant major. So it was quite odd to like make a formation. Let me watch YouTube the night before and get in the manuals. So, I think that helped me a lot, having those years of just kind of dealing with people working with contractors every day and civilians, and really everybody you're in the military, but really, everybody's kind of, it's a communication barrier. I always thought the uniform was a huge communication barrier. My squadron CSM, DJ Blake, probably a lot of folks know him, especially I don't know if he's still the JSOC CSM or if he transitioned out, but he was my squadron CSM for a long time in the unit. And, it was always easy and approachable to talk to these people who were such accomplished humans. And, it didn't take any or diminish the respect. And you always know when to act accordingly, but you didn't have that communication barrier of a uniform there that kind of halts dialogue and that personable connection with people. And so, I thought that was extremely helpful, and I draw on that all the time. And, it's, in the unit, I don't know if I'm talking to an E4 admin assistant or the E8, they both know their job really well, so,
yeah.
I never really learned to associate rank that way. I just kind of treat everybody with respect and you're either good at your job or you're not.
Yeah. Well, so what's next for you, Uriah? So when you start looking, you kind of help map out what your path was, kind of to this point, and some of that stuff you either fell into, somebody forced you into, or whatever. But it seems like you've had a pattern of growth that's occurred through this whole thing. Just curious, what are you thinking in terms of your passion and purpose and where it might end up taking you?
I've honestly been thinking a lot about that lately. I'm kind of like, I don't know if it's a midlife crisis that I'm going through. I already had a sports car, so I haven't bought one of those.
Gold jewelry? You got the gold jewelry yet or anything?
No.
It's usually one or the other.
Yeah. No, didn't do that. But it's like, I know that it just feels like I should be being a better steward with my time now and family.
Yeah.
And that I've kind of dedicated, the past 23 years to being away, and how much time is left on earth and how much of that is, time that I'm fully functioning and able to do things and enjoy things. And it kind of puts into perspective, do I need to be doing all this right now? Do I need to be continuing? Am I doing this for me? Why am I continuing to try to climb? But I think you're kind of, certain folks are just ingrained with that. You start from the bottom and then you want to climb to the top of the ladder again. And then you're back at the bottom of the ladder. Now you want to top to the climb. And it's just like it's cyclic. You just, it's ingrained in you to do it. But now I'm like, should I be breaking that chain? Should I maybe be looking at something that allows me the little bit more time and flexibility to, I've never taken vacations. I never, did any of that stuff. I best did a work vacation. Bring the wife when I'm TDY and she gets to go hang out in the mall.
Right.
Do whatever she does while I'm at work. That's vacation. That's, because half the ticket was paid for by Uncle Sam. So that's what I know about vacation. So
it's good you're going through that exercise though, because I think, many moons ago, we had an author that came on, and I think her book is actually a New York Times bestseller that talked about disrupting yourself on occasion. And that was the term that she kind of, used. And when you think about it, back in the day, and we still kind of do it, I guess, for some PCs, you don't do it as much for Macs. You hit Control-Alt-Delete every once in a while because things are screwing up and your computer's not acting right. And so you just decide, okay, I'm just going to reboot this thing. And maybe it'll solve the problem. And sometimes it does. But in our own lives, we don't think about that as at certain points we have to self-reflect, and we've got to think about the priorities and the things that are most really important to us. And you hit on things like family and time with them and stuff like that, because your time on Earth is really finite. I mean, you only have so much time. And so in that sense, occasionally throughout our lives, if we thought about disrupting in terms of rebooting and reflecting and saying, all right, I'm going to change something now. It's time for me to reboot. time for me to go in a different direction. And you did that through your military career and going from in and out of SOF to going into, conventional forces, whether it was by choice or not. And you're kind of, looking at that in your career right now. So it's just another way of offering, perhaps as a way of expressing it, that you're right now in a state of, it's time to disrupt. It's time for a change. And disrupt could be something mild, like you're saying, in your personal life and not necessarily in your professional. At least that's how I would look at it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good, it's insightful, yeah, I think that I do look at that. I look at, I've always been in a pretty close family, close military family. My kids all still come around, my mom and dad visit all the time. And so, I look at where they are in their lives and what, they're doing. And me and my dad actually worked together, which were quite, I recruited him to the company. He was running the night vision program for the military. And then I said, we need a good acquisition guy in program management. So, so now we get to work and spend some time together. But yeah, I think, I think that's what it is. I think it's time to maybe live not so much for self, although we work to provide, right? That's why we work, to provide a quality of life and a certain lifestyle. But at times that becomes not important, and you need to think about, I think, those times. And that's what I guess makes me reflect back about when he tells me, you were never around, I don't know if you realize that, but you were never there.
Yeah. It's definitely, and if people did that more earlier in their career or in life and everything else, it certainly helps build upon that much later. But we tend to get so focused up in everything that we're doing that, it's one of those things we usually don't do until we're much older, or we start reflecting.
No, it's funny because it's sort of like analogous to what most guys, I think, and gals go through when they're getting out of service or they're going through it, and you got to start a new job. Like you were talking about the line medics stuff. Like you should strive to be the best, but you don't get to be the best at that one thing forever. Like you're going to have to find another mountain to climb. And that was cool. I got a lot out of that. A ton of humility.
Yeah, I agree.
Hats off, man. Thank you.
Yeah, I love that you've been in so many different kinds of jobs. And I love that you shared your story. And I don't love that it happened to you, but I love that you tackled this as a very senior person. We're not apologetic about it. And, you kind of walked through that fire while you were still on active duty. And I think, as all of us know, we think that we are better as a department sharing stories like that and saying it's okay to get help and there's nothing wrong with it. And yet, for as many stories as I hear about people that are open and honest and walk through it, there are 10 times as many that said, my chain of command wouldn't let me do this or told me not to do that or whatever. So, I think it's super important. I think it's a story that we just continue to tell. I think, when you talked about mountain to climb, and I think we all went through that. And I think what I found is I look for different ways to use my talents. So I don't think I've climbed any mountains, frankly. I think there are a bunch of little hills where I was like, I want to do a little bit of nonprofit work and I want to do a little bit of speaking and tell my story. And Robert sent me a t-shirt. So now I do a podcast. And I think that's
all it took. Yeah.
That was all it took. Truly. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's, going through it. I mean, I can certainly see it in, as far as not so much the support, I would say, for the transition effort. I would say it much more than I felt like when I was going through my struggle, it was, we can't have a senior leader committing suicide and be on the Army Times. So we need to adjudicate this very quick, make it decisive, support him, and move on. And so I think that's what I seen. And I got a friend who's from a good friend of mine. He worked for me. He spent a long time in the Ranger Regiment. And he's doing the same exact program that I did right now. And he is a CSM, and he's, the same thing. It's the fast track out, whether I think that they should hold on to a little bit longer and let you work through it so you can truly get the help you need, instead of it's much more like a streamlined process for disposition versus a process for treatment.
Yeah.
It's sort of like get this equipment off your books before it breaks down and you're stuck with it.
Yeah.
Like, let's put it out. And
and that's what I always thought. Like I said, my son had a similar path, but the difference is he was in E2, E3 at the time, and so like his going through that process was much more difficult. And I kind of got the carpet rolled out as I went through the process. Oh, let me help you, and let me fast track your paperwork, and let me give you your own manager who manages things for you. And so that's where I can see that folks don't get the help they need, and with the issues that we have with suicide and things like that. And it's it's not a completely broken system, but it just needs, I think, emphasis dedicated to some of the parts that it's not dedicated towards, or there's just what I mean? It almost seems like it's about preservation of the force, and I don't mean the people. It's okay. And I get it. The Army's got to go marching along, but I also believe in, like I said, Sean Mulvaney, who I hold him in such high regard. He always says, we have to have the ability to separate people and give them a quality of life and let them live with dignity and respect. And that's why his treatment modalities have always been and I always thought about that, like return them, give them a quality of life, and where they have some self-respect when they transition and separate service. And so, I've always kind of carried that with me, but I think that, there's some obvious things that need improvement on, but we'll see.
It's a lot better than it was. That's for sure.
It is.
It's a long way
I guess
to go.
that's the optimistic way to look at it. Yeah, it's improving, but it's a lot too. It's a big elephant to eat, so it's just figuring out which piece should we eat first, I think, instead of trying to get the whole thing at once. So
yeah, for sure.
I think whenever we get to share stories like yours, it goes a long way, because they think, like they think it's the E2 or the E3 and it's some kid in the barracks, or it's somebody from a broken home or a checkered past. And maybe they were on the verge anyway. And maybe they were going to do what they were going to do without the Army, because we get extreme personality types. But
yeah,
for me, my like light bulb moment, my first sergeant was like, "Hey, I'm a drunk. I hate my kids. I hate my life. I'm going to get help." I talked to a therapist. He's like, "If you feel this way, you need to do it too." And I'm like, this guy's made of iron. Like I didn't think anything could affect him like that. And it gave me that space to reflect and probably save my life, And so, I mean, if it can happen to guys like that, it can happen to guys like you. Then it really does a lot to remove that stigma for that.
Yeah, there's resiliency, but I don't think there is no like immunity. I don't think anybody's immune to it. There's definitely people who have some extreme levels of resiliency and perseverance. But hey, thanks. I appreciate you guys having me on and
absolutely
sharing a little bit of the story.
No, I appreciate you coming on. I mean that with all sincerity. I think again the lessons and stuff and stories that you provided are stuff that quite honestly we don't always get to hear. We put our SOF community in some cases very much high on a pedestal, whereas other people listen to people within the SOF and think, well, there's a whole force out here that you've recognized within this show that's the conventional force that does equally or does just as much good stuff that doesn't get recognized. And so by you being somebody that had the opportunity to see both sides of it and present both sides of that and recognize, the value, that's really great. I think that they're not always recognized in that way. So, and again, man, I appreciate you even talking about, your journey through post-traumatic stress and some of the challenges.
Oh yeah, no, it definitely affects I learned that from some of my early trips with, Sean, and we would go down to Damnick, and basically, you know, operators would be lined all the way up down the hallway, and I distinctly remember one guy on his 23rd rotation, and it was the oddest thing. He was pissed, so we gave him the shot, and he got up and he was mad. He was like, "Doc, I don't like this shit. I don't feel like I want to hurt people anymore, and I need to feel like I can hurt people, and I need to hurt people."
Wow.
It was just like, okay.
I mean, Paul had it, and we know others who have had it as well. And I knew somebody here that was a good family friend that had the SGB, and it was life-changing for him. And Paul said the same thing. But listen, I think, what you're doing now and the way in which you're giving back, and even coming on this show, quite honestly, and sharing your journey and your story, are one of those things that are, a way of healing, a way of moving forward, and those types of things. And I wish you nothing but the best, but I actually appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your story, for sure, with all of us.
Oh, thanks. Happy to do it.